and it's likely that these people who want to remain isolated and live off the land might find it to be increasingly difficult. Number 14. Palmerston Island. Palmerston Island is an isolated atoll off the Cook Islands and is a sandy mound on top of a coral reef that surrounds a central lagoon. It was first discovered by the expedition of Captain Cook in 1774 and is now home to one of the most remote communities on Earth. There are currently 62 inhabitants, 59 of whom are descendants of an English sailor who lived there in the mid-19th century. They are self-sufficient and are even able to generate their own electricity, which is fortunate because with no airport or dock, ships from elsewhere only visit the island a couple of times a year with supplies. If you want an isolated desert island with none of the pressures of modern life, then this is the place. Number 13. Tristan da Cunha. In the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, 1,511 miles from Cape Town and 2,166 miles from the Falkland Islands, is the world's most isolated archipelago, Tristan da Cunha. It's a British overseas territory, covers an area of 38 square miles, and with no airstrip, the only way to reach the island is a 6-day boat trip to South Africa, which sails 8 or 9 times a year. Amazingly, for somewhere so remote, there's a permanent population of around 250 people. Most of them are farmers and fishermen, and the community sustains its economy by the export of Tristan rock lobster. The only settlement on the island is called Edinburgh of the Seven Seas, which itself holds the record for being the most isolated town in the world. Number 12. Ittoqqortoormiit. The town of Ittoqqortoormiit is the most remote settlement in Greenland and is located on the far eastern coast of the country, around 24 miles from the nearest airport. To get there requires a helicopter charter, and for large parts of the year, it's completely inaccessible because of ice cover. It's a place that's known for wildlife such as polar bears, seals, shrimp, and musk oxen, and was originally built so hunters could take advantage of the thriving ecosystem. Now there are around 450 inhabitants who live in the interspersed huts and have very little contact with the outside world. Number 11. Coober Pedy. There are countless isolated communities around the world that sprang up to support miners in search of precious objects. But there's none as strange as Coober Pedy in Australia. It's often referred to as the opal capital of the world and is on the site of the largest open opal mine on the planet. There are just under 2,000 inhabitants, and because it's in such a harsh environment, most buildings have been carved from the earth and are underground. Apart from the mining, the town also relies on tourism for those who are willing to make the trip, and is particularly famous for its golf course, which has no grass whatsoever, apart from a small piece of turf from which to tee off. Number 10. Siwa Oasis. The Siwa Oasis has long been an important part of Egyptian culture, even as long back as the ancient Egyptians, and today it remains one of the most remote communities in the country. It's deep within the western desert in the Sahara and is 348 miles away from Cairo. While it has around 33,000 permanent residents, they live a detached desert lifestyle, and until a tarmac road was built in the 1980s, the only way to reach it was by camel. The economy relies mainly on agriculture, where they grow dates and olives, and it's also a popular tourist destination for anyone wanting to see the ruins that, in some cases, are many thousands of years old. Its remoteness means that it escapes the political turmoil that happens in the rest of the country, and it truly is an oasis of calm from the outside world. Number 9. The Changpa. The Changpa tribe are a group of nomadic people who live on a high-altitude plain in western and northern Tibet. They move across the land taking care of their flocks of yaks and goats, and unlike in other regions around the world, they don't face pressure from static farmers because the land is seen as too inhospitable for other agricultural uses. They also travel through the Indian-administered Handley Valley, where there are 6 isolated settlements that are home to those that are more sedentary than the nomadic members. In all, there are thought to be around 500,000 Changpa, and they rely on the trade of livestock to survive. One of the breeds they raise is the highly prized Chankra goat, which produce pashmina fiber, and is one of the most expensive natural fabrics in the world. This is their main source of income, and a highly profitable one, but this certainly isn't a life that most people would be able to endure. Number 8. Kerguelen Islands. The Kerguelen Islands are a group of islands that lie in the Antarctic around 2,100 miles away from Madagascar, which is the nearest populated place. This is one of the most remote pieces of land in the world and is part of the French Southern and Antarctic lands. The weather here is extremely tough, so it's no surprise that they're also known as the Desolation Islands. The main island is called Grande Terre and covers an area of 2,577 square miles. It's constantly subjected to strong icy winds and surrounded by rough seas. And although there's no indigenous population, it's home to a French outpost that has up to 100 residents who perform scientific research or are on military secondment. The islands have no airstrip, so the only way to access them is by ship. And it's not exactly the type of place a boat will stop en route to somewhere else. The only vessels to visit here are specifically scheduled ones. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe to Top 5s with notifications on. Number 7. The Awa. It is not known for certain how many isolated tribes remain within the Amazon rainforest, but there's one that we do know about called the Awa. They live on the islands at the eastern edge of the Amazon, where their 350 members live a largely nomadic lifestyle. If they had their own way, they wouldn't have anything to do with outsiders. But the arrival of illegal loggers and poachers has meant the encounters have become increasingly common in the past few decades. Because they're losing such a large amount of land to these activities, Survival International has declared the Awa to be the most endangered tribe on the planet and are taking steps to try to protect them. Most have now had to give in to the pressure and permanently settle in villages, but it's thought as many as 100 could be clinging on to their traditional way of life. They aren't in contact with the outside world and will fight for the preservation of the rainforest, and hopefully one day they'll be left in peace once more. Number 6. Mengingo Island. Mengingo Island is one of the most surprising isolated communities in the world and is a half-acre plot of land in the middle of Lake Victoria. There's a dispute as to whether or not it's part of Kenya or Uganda and is actually one of the most densely populated places on Earth. That's because it's a haven for fishermen who work on the lake's waters and is home to at least 500 people. It was first settled upon in 1991 when, at the time, it was covered in sand, birds, and snakes. But now it's impossible to see the ground thanks to all of the buildings. As well as the homes, there are 4 pubs, a number of brothels, and a pharmacy. But this isn't a place that's welcoming to visitors. The only way to get here is by boat, and the residents are somewhat skeptical of outsiders. Number 5. Taiga. Very little is known about the town of Taiga that lies deep within the tundra of Siberia. It was founded more than 300 years ago by hunters in search of fur and valuables within the snow. And while many have since left, there's still a core population of around 120 people. They value their isolation so much that they don't let outsiders know the exact location of where they live or the name they give to their community. But in recent years, they have allowed some photographers to visit to see what life is like there. They live off the land and have no need for currency unless they're visiting the nearest city for supplies. Hunting for fur and meat is still the main work available, and they keep a large herd of livestock to supplement their needs. Even though the idea of living in such isolation might sound appealing, one thing they've had to overcome is the extreme cold. It can reach temperatures of minus 63 degrees Fahrenheit on a good day, and even though fresh water is available, they often use the snow to wash instead because it's seen as a great source of vitality. The Taiga community intends to keep living this way for as long as they can, and those that decide they want to join wider society are the only sources we have for how their people live. With climate change changing the environment, however, it's not entirely clear how long they'll be able to continue supporting themselves before they're all forced to choose a different way of life. Number 4. Villa Las Estrellas. Villa Las Estrellas is an extremely remote Chilean settlement that's on King George Island in Antarctica. It's the largest of the 2 permanent villages on the continent and has a population of 150 during the summer, which drops to just 80 during the winter. It's attached to the Chilean military base, and most residents work as support staff. There's a post office, which is a popular tourist attraction because if you send a letter from here, you get an Antarctica postmark, and there are medical facilities provided by the military base. Healthcare provisions are, however, limited, and this has led to the introduction of a rule for residents that you won't find anywhere else on Earth. Everyone, including children, have to have their appendixes removed before they can live there, because if they suffered complications while in Villa La Estrella, there would be little anyone could do to help. The main community hub is the gymnasium, where residents play sports together, work out, and use the sauna, and it also has larger spaces where cultural events take place. Despite its remoteness, life here goes on just like it does everywhere else, and there's even a school with 2 teachers that ensure the 15 children of the village continue to be educated while their families are there. Number 3. Hadibu. Hadibu is the capital city of Yemen's Socotra Island and is possibly the most alien-like community you'll find anywhere on Earth. The people here earn their living by taking care of livestock, but their surroundings are out of this world. The archipelago is isolated from the mainland, and because the land mass separated hundreds of thousands of years ago, the local plants and wildlife have evolved along a different path. In fact, as much as a third of plant life there is only found in this part of the world, and it's regarded as one of the most important regions of biodiversity on our planet. It also holds the record of being the most isolated landforms of continental origin, having broken off from Africa a long time ago and wasn't formed by a volcanic eruption like every other remote island. One of the most famous plant species that can be found here is the dragon's blood tree, which has a strange umbrella-like shape. Its sap is a deep krill imagery to give an indication, so the consensus is that the island is just best left well alone. Number 1. Omiakon. If you like cooler temperatures, then you should visit Omiakon, because this is the coldest place in the world that has a permanent population. It's in the Sakha Republic in eastern Russia and is located between 2 valleys that channel the wind and make the region much colder than it would be otherwise. Currently, there are around 900 residents, and the only way to get there is via a small airstrip that was built during the Second World War. It's so cold that the ground here is permanently frozen, and there's a monument in the center of town to commemorate a thermometer reading in 1924 when the temperature plummeted to minus 96.2 degrees Fahrenheit. It's almost unbelievable that a community can survive here, and they do it with very little help from elsewhere. They hunt their own food, chop down trees to provide fuel for warmth, and have very little to do with outsiders whatsoever. Subscribe to Top 5s for more and check out some of our other popular videos.